Hey everyone, Joe here. I recently sat down for another chat with Johannes from Aligned Games. Part 1 is linked in the description, though I don't think it's necessary to watch the first one to get value out of this one. In addition to discussing the success of Devlog 5 and the launch of Infiniwar's Steam page, we continued covering a wide variety of more new topics. Procedural generation, the relative importance of replayability, visual appeal, and narrative, developing games with an art background versus a programming background, performance and hardware targeting, voice acting, localization, and more. This was another fun conversation, so grab yourself a drink, get your workout started, load that dishwasher, or do whatever else floats your boat.
So, Joe, it's good to speak to you again for the second time. Hopefully we can have another riveting conversation. I enjoyed the last one.
Yeah, definitely. I'm going to try my best to not talk over you, because I noticed in the last conversation, maybe because of the delay between our locations,
Yeah.
that there was... Yeah, so I'm gonna try my best, but I can't promise anything there.
Yeah, I think that's also to do with... So I recently moved to another state. Well, it's not called states here. It's called provinces. But I moved to another province across the country. And I moved to a more rural province, but I've got a much better connection now, so it might be better. And so far I haven't heard any issues. But I am also kind of sick, getting a little bit of an itch in my throat, so might cough here and there, and you said that you might as well, so to the listeners, just excuse us if that happens.
Yeah, I was sick last week, and I don't think I am anymore, but allergies or fire season or something here is really... So yeah, I got a giant bottle of water here, so hopefully that'll be enough and I won't run out.
Yeah, I should do that next time. Yeah, so I wanted to get straight into the chat because I only have about an hour today. So
Okay.
to get started, you recently had a devlog that I saw that did really well, and you've been doing a lot of work on your games. So if you don't mind, just let everyone know what's been happening and just catch us up on that.
Yeah, Devlog 5 was huge, and honestly, I've got to thank you for the idea here, because before I put out Devlog 5, my first devlog got a decent amount of traffic. I think a fair amount of that was just because Mark Brown's face was on the thumbnail. Sorry, not sorry, for that. But then, they kind of each one sort of progressively got a little bit less viewership, and I think that's kind of natural. If you look at most channels, like they have like maybe a big first devlog where they introduce a concept, and then the subsequent topics are more specialized and aren't as interesting or aren't as widely interesting.
Yeah.
Or maybe people just feel like, oh, well, I can't watch that because I haven't watched from the beginning. So people start at the beginning and then they don't get all the way through, like a funnel. So my fourth devlog did poorly, like less well than I was hoping.
Yeah.
I think the topic was just too specialized, or something like that.
Yeah, that could be. YouTube has... I sometimes wonder if, like, we get only a limited amount of possible successes with YouTube in a given time frame, because it sometimes feels like I would, because I run multiple channels, but I would put in a lot of effort, and then I would get like 60 views. And then on another channel, I would do something like just record talking to the camera, and it would get like 2K views. And it can be pretty frustrating.
Yeah, it does seem a little capricious in a way. So after the sort of, I wouldn't say failure, but just a disappointing fourth devlog where I had put more time and effort than I ever had before in terms of scripting and editing and all that stuff, to get a significant fraction of the previous views that I was getting. Like the trend was worrying. So I mean, it wasn't that worrying because I was like, well, my main goal is to make a game, is not to make a YouTube channel. The YouTube channel is just a vehicle to get people aware of the game. So I was like, well, okay, it's not the end of the world. It is what it is. But so I was kind of thinking of like, how can I change things up? Maybe the topic is too narrow. Maybe I'm going too slow. Because the other thing that I had been sort of realizing was, I started my devlog sort of in the past, where I
Yeah.
was talking about stuff I did 2 years ago, and it wasn't talking about the current game. So the game had vastly eclipsed what I was talking about in the devlogs, and I had so much cool stuff I wanted to get to, but I realized that at the pace I was going, it was like, well, I'm not going to be able to talk about any of the really cool stuff that I'm doing until like at the pace I'm making the devlogs, like a year or two from now. Like this is not going to work.
Yeah.
So I just had to pivot, and I decided, all right, fast forward to today. Let's talk about what I'm actually doing, and getting back to why I need to thank you for the idea. The devlog that you had about I don't think it was named at that point, the Gravebane Curse, where it was I'm making a Kingsfield clone, and that devlog did very well for you. And I thought, well, maybe I could do something like this, just like the concept of, hey, I'm making a game that's inspired by X. You know, fans of X, gather to me.
Yeah. Well, it's not like I'm the first person to do it. It's just basically banking on nostalgia, and I think you can find quite a lot of success that way. I also think we'll get into this later on, but I also think it's the reason that my new side project, the devlog, didn't do well, is because that nostalgia doesn't exist yet for the project that I was banking on, which is Brotato in this case. So it's a technique to get people to be interested in something that they already had interest in. So an example of that is like so it's been Gamescom and all of that stuff, and I'm not good at keeping track of these festivals and all of that kind of stuff, but sometimes you'll see a game pop up, and for me it was I think it's a new Fable game, and I saw it was something like, maybe it just said Fable 4 or something like this, and I just got like a really excited feeling. And it's a funny thing because you don't know if the game is going to be good or bad or anything, but it's just that that familiar feeling of games that you enjoyed as a child. So I think all it really is just banking on previous experiences that people have had.
Yeah, it's kind of like a hopes and vibes kind of thing of just you see something and you're like, oh, I want this to be good.
Yeah.
You don't know anything about it, but it's a property you like, or it's a sequel, or even a spiritual sequel to something that you really liked, and you're like, I don't even see any proof that it's going to be good, but hope is enough. So I think I definitely tapped into that a little bit. I didn't realize how much of it there would be. I was a little surprised.
Okay. How much nostalgia, or what do you mean?
Yeah, how much nostalgia there was. Like, I knew I had it, but, anytime you're talking about games with people, everybody has their, like, the big names that everybody likes. Everybody loves Zelda, everybody loves Mario, everybody loves, like, these are the things that people have, they grew up with in their childhood. Not a lot of people are talking about World in Conflict, at least not. But when you get an audience as big as the internet, or a potential audience as big as the internet, you can find a bunch of weirdos like you, and then it turns out there's a lot of them. So yeah, Devlog 5 ended up being doubling the rest of my views of all the other devlogs combined.
Yeah.
So like that scale, it pushed me over the edge to the YouTube partner program. So like there's a bunch of stuff that unlocks on YouTube now that I can do.
That's cool.
Potentially to support the channel. A ton of new subs, like it doubled my sub count in, about a month or less than a month. And the video is still getting views over a month later, like hundreds of views a day, which is not what any of the other devlogs have done. They all kind of, after a few days or weeks, they eventually get to the point where it's, a trickle of views a day, maybe half a dozen or something. But this one is still going strong, and I think tapping into the nostalgia was a big aspect of that. Hopefully I don't get busted by Ubisoft someday for having a logo in my thumbnail, but maybe I'm small enough to still fly under the radar.
I think you would need to be quite big for that to be a problem.
Yeah, I mean, I could always change the thumbnail, but there's evidence, so hopefully I can fly under the radar there. And speaking of flying under the radar, I think actually the F-117 Nighthawk that's on the thumbnail was, at least maybe not. It was probably 80% the Wick logo, but a little bit the sort of charismatic, photogenic F-117 kind of looks cool and intriguing.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that played a role too, and it kind of made me reconsider some of my art objectives, short term, medium term, and long term. Of some of my art assets have been really just prototyping assets for a very long time, and I'm sort of realizing the marketing benefit of having a few sort of iconic, nice looking iconic models that can feature in thumbnails and things like that. So that has made me reconsider some of those and actually start working on some better models. And one of the other things that came up with the devlog before, I got decent numbers of views, a few thousand here and a few thousand there, and a smallish crop of comments, a few dozen comments on each video, and most of them were just hey, looks cool, not super engaged comments for the most part.
Sort of lukewarm.
Mostly just like when it's small enough, nobody really gives feedback. It's just hey, looks cool.
It's more like just encouragement.
Which is nice.
Yeah,
I don't want to take away from those early comments, and some of them, of course, people attach to, and you do get the detailed.
Mm-hmm.
But one thing I wasn't getting at all yet, which was worrying to me, was criticism.
Mm-hmm.
Because if people don't have strong reactions to what you're doing, maybe they don't care.
That's true.
And really, up until that point, I hadn't gotten any detractors, any other than a few quibbles about the thumbnails here and there. Some people were upset with how I featured brackies on one of the thumbnails, so I changed that thumbnail to be a little more obvious that it's not me partnering with brackies.
Why would they be upset about that? That's such a strange thing.
I think some people, because it was right around the time I think that he came back.
Mm-hmm.
I had actually put that devlog out before he came back, so I just thought he was gone forever, like most people did.
Yeah, seemed that way.
Yeah, but then so some people were like, "Is Bracky's back?" And then no, he's not. He was part of the inspiration for this video. Like, I thought you could just put people's face on a thumbnail and have it be understood that doesn't mean they're in the video. It just means they're like a topic in the video. Anyway, so those are the only criticisms I had gotten in the past. It wasn't really like focused on the game, and that was worrying to me. So that is not an issue anymore. The overwhelming comments on Devlog 5 were really positive, and I got a lot of comments, like a lot more than usual. Even like for the number of views that it got, like comments per view was a higher ratio even. People were talking about it more than they were in the past, and I think that's probably because I featured the game more front and center again, or not again, instead of the way I had been doing it in the past, which was sort of like a history lesson of how the game came to be, which is still interesting, but interesting to a smaller audience, I think. Because I was putting the design and the plan of the game front and center, I think that made it more interesting to talk about, so more people engaged with that.
Yeah, I think it's sort of like if you see yourself as your audience for a second, when you see a game that you find interesting, you have to think: do you care about the person creating the game, or do you care about the game? So I think that's sort of what it comes down to. I think there is a subsection of people that, the sort of personal stuff and the personal journey, that stuff is interesting too. But what I find as well is usually those people are other developers, which isn't necessarily going to be your target audience if you want to make some real money, which, ultimately we all want to do. So I think it's interesting to sort of be able to divide those. And I think you will be able to see those in the comments. Because I don't know if we're going to get to it in this chat, but I want to talk to you about marketing and stuff like that as well. Things that I've been doing recently, feeling a little bit more jaded about game design and starting to treat it more like a job rather than not a hobby, but something that, is passion first, and more something that is becoming, survival oriented, if I can put it that way, because at some point, for it to be a career, it has to become a career. And that sounds stupid, but it's the reality. It's, you can't just make a couple $1,000s a month forever. You, at some stage, you need to make real money to be able to hire people and make a big team. And obviously, I know you're not at that point with your game, and your situation is a little bit different because you are supporting yourself with a job. But I guess the question is, if the game is successful, would you, be interested in sort of making it the kind of thing where you then use that as a launching pad to start your own studio, or do you always want to go the indie route with all of the games?
Oh man, yeah, that's a big question. It's probably too early for me to answer that exactly. I'm more at the stage of, like you said, I have a full-time job, so I'm doing all this stuff just nights and weekends when I have time, um,
Mm-hmm.
which is it's a tough pace to keep up because when you work all day and then you're like, all right, time to work some more, and when does the rest of life happen?
Yeah, and
Um,
and you have family, and you have friends, and you have pets and responsibilities. So it's just interesting to me to see that dynamic. Because the main reason I'm asking that is because you said, when you were able to join the partner program, you mentioned that it would help financially support the channel and support your endeavors. So it's interesting to me to know that, is there a financial separation between being a game developer as a hobbyist and, your professional life? Or is it the sort of thing where eventually that, you would merge them? I guess is what I'm getting at. And this isn't specifically about your game. It's just about where you
yeah,
see yourself as someone. I'm just sort of drawing some comparisons between the sort of developers that we are.
yeah. It's definitely evolving, and some of this also has to do with a topic I'm not going to go into significantly, which is the full-time job.
Hmm.
The market is tough right now, so I'm evaluating my current career path, and I've been doing web development for oh like 15 years now almost, and I'm like, do I want to keep doing that?
Hmm.
Like if I had to pivot now, would I still do that? Um, Maybe not. And if I was going to pivot, when would I do it? What stage of my life would I do it? And maybe now's the time. Maybe now I've got a bit of financial runway where I could take a risk like that. Um,
Yeah, I
but
think.
it's
Yeah, it's interesting to me as well, because I think a big difference as well is, you being an American. It's also, it's you have to look at it differently because the cost of living is a lot higher for someone in that part of the world.
Yeah, and I live in the Bay Area in California, so it's even worse than normal. Like there's places in the US where you can live relatively inexpensively. Uh Not where I live right now.
Hmm.
Um so
Yeah,
that is also another consideration
yeah, and I mean,
is I
no, go ahead.
oh, I was just going to say like there's sort of a mutual. I have this Bay Area tech job sort of, and I have this Bay Area um cost of living, and they're kind of linked. So if Bay Area tech job goes away, what happens to Bay Area lifestyle, Bay Area cost of living
Hmm.
could get a little dicey. So that's a consideration as well. Like most of the time, if an indie game developer, to bring it back to game development, if they are thinking about going independent and quitting their job or whatever, they're one of the things that comes up a lot is they move somewhere that is cheaper.
Hmm.
And I don't really want to do that right now for reasons I won't get into. Um,
Yeah.
so I'm kind of stuck in the need some real job to support myself and what I do, but then also want to make this game,
Mm.
and it's important to me to make this game at this point. Like I'm so far into it, not in like a uh, what is it, the gambler's fallacy? What's the thing I'm thinking of? Good money after bad. You know what I'm talking about. Um, Not in that sort of way, like, oh geez, now I'm stuck doing this. It's more like the deeper I get into it, the more
I know what
the
you mean.
more I want to. Yeah. And the more my brain has warmed up to the idea of taking big risks, like what if we tried this thing? Like, how many wish lists do I need now? How long could I go and experiment? So bringing it back to like YouTube partner program type stuff, I turned on you can run ads on your videos. That'll probably annoy some people, but it's an experiment at this point.
Yeah.
And it'll probably make pennies, honestly. Like,
for a while.
It's a little bit of a bummer that YouTube doesn't retroactively pay you for watch time.
It is.
I guess it makes sense.
I get it from their perspective as well.
Yeah, because they weren't. I guess somebody said that they don't run ads on non monetized content.
Yeah.
I figured YouTube was running ads on my stuff anyway, and I just wasn't getting any. I just wasn't seeing any of it. But I guess that's not how it works. So that's rather interesting.
Yeah, and just to make this point. The reason I'm talking about this at all is just because, most of the people that are going to watch this, and obviously these sort of videos don't get big numbers, but to the, 200 or 300 people that are going to see this, most of them are going to be developers at this point. And maybe this is something that grows over time, but, and so it's just interesting to me to have these conversations with other developers where obviously the game is important, and maybe a few people see the game and wishlist it from this, but it's important to have the conversations where other developers, maybe ones that are a little bit younger than we are, can sort of see, what is not necessarily needed, but the sort of life that, contrasting lives that people can have with video game development. And it's a difficult thing to do. So I think it's just interesting to talk about this. But pivoting from that, you mentioned how many wishlists you would need from Steam, and I do want to talk a little bit about Steam as well. So to get back onto your game, then have you seen an uptick in wishlists, or actually, I think you mentioned your Steam page might be going live now, right?
Oh, it is live now. So yeah, thanks for bringing us to here. So I did put the Steam page up.
Okay.
Part of the reason was I got so many people on Devlog 5 in the comments asking, "Where's the Steam page? Where's the Steam page? I went to search for it and I didn't find it. Where is it?"
Mm-hmm.
Because I didn't have one yet, and I do wish that I had gotten the Steam page up sooner, because then I have this big devlog that does well. I could have sent all these people to get to
definitely
to wishlist the game, but it wasn't ready at the time.
It's a catch-22 a little bit, because it's not like you could have known that this devlog was going to be the one that does this, but to developers listening, it is a lesson in being ready, because I heard this thing, I don't know exactly how it goes, but 80% of luck is just being ready when you do get lucky. So it's important to get a Steam page up, even if you don't have much to show yet. And some of the big guys like Thomas Brush will tell you that. But in this case, I'm sure you were able to still get a lot of those guys to then go retroactively and go and wishlist.
Yeah, I did do a follow-up video, like kind of a quick follow-up video on Devlog 5 of like answering the top questions and one of the main ones was like, where's the Steam page, and like, where's the Discord, and all these kinds of things. Still no Discord. That'll be a future thing, but I knew I had to get Steam up and running as quick as I could. So I did put together a Steam page, and that was kind of an interesting experience in itself. Because I didn't know in advance whether any video would pop off like it did, and it definitely didn't know that it would be the very next one. So it would have been nice to have it up sooner. It is tough because you do got to fork over $100.
Yeah, true.
And it's a process to you've made a ton of Steam pages, especially for your first one where you don't know how to do it or you don't know what's needed, and then suddenly Steam is asking you for like 30 different art assets of different configurations of backgrounds and logos and all this stuff that like maybe you don't have a logo yet. And fortunately, I have a kind of temporary logo that does the job. But you
Yeah.
start up a Steam page, but then you suddenly realize like, oh, I need background art, I need I need a logo, I need all this
Yeah,
marketing copy,
definitely.
I need, and then all the best practices for making Steam pages, like, oh, I need to record all these
Hmm.
gifs, whatever I call them gifs. I'm Team GIF. Um,
I think they are called GIFs, but GIF is fun to say it. Like,
yeah,
I don't really care
it's
so much. Um,
I think the original creator calls it GIF, but he has since admitted defeat and says, "Fine, it's GIF because that's what everybody says."
it's one of those
Um,
internet things that it's really just like, who cares at the end of the day.
yeah, yeah.
Um, so, so if you don't mind, I'd like to take a moment to speak about Steam pages, because
Yeah.
I've pulled up yours now, um,
Oh, okay. I
and
guess I should do that just to take a look.
so this isn't going to be a critique. It's just going to be sort of like a first, because I haven't seen it yet. Intentionally, I wanted to wait until we had the chat to actually see what you did do, and right off the bat, I have to say I'm quite impressed. And to other developers watching this, I will be putting this on. I'll send a link on the screen and in the description so that you guys can visit and see what he did. But this is a good Steam page right off the bat, and I've had a lot of conversations with other developers that haven't made Steam pages yet, but that have wanted to, about what to do. And right off the bat, you did a lot of the good stuff already. So I don't know what you don't have to tell us, but I'm pretty sure you are getting a fair trickle of wish lists coming in every day and week.
Yeah, so far the response for wish lists has been great. I didn't know what to expect. Day one, I was like, "Am I going to get 10? Am I going to get 100? Am I going to get 1,000?" I didn't get 1,000 on the first day, but I did get over 1,000. I think there's some NDA stuff, so we can't be. I have to be a little coy about the numbers, or not NDA, but like Steam terms of service stuff where you can't talk about exact specific numbers and stuff like that. But I
Kinda, but
did.
it's sort of like a gray area. They don't really care.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But you
But I
don't
did
you
get
don't have to.
over 1,000 in about the first week, which was good.
That's pretty good.
And it's still going. So I think I'm over 1,500 now,
That's
which
very
is
good.
for the first, it's not even the first month yet. So I'm pretty happy with that, and it seems to still be going. And the thing that I was a little bit surprised about is I seem to be getting some regular Steam traffic, like just from Steam recommendations.
Hmm.
I had thought that I was going to get no push at all from Steam because it's an unreleased game, and that it was all just going to be sort of an endpoint for me to send people to, from the videos, from Twitter. Um, but I'm actually getting a fair amount of, not a lot, but a fair amount more than I thought I would be, which was zero,
Yeah.
of just Steam recommending or people searching for, people looking for like, man, there's not enough real-time tactics games out there. What's up and coming? Like, I've actually had people tell me that that's what they did. They searched for, new or unreleased real-time tactics games to see if there was anything, and they found my game and they are interested.
Hmm.
So it is interesting to see that there's sort of, multiple algorithms at play now. You've got the YouTube algorithm, you've got the Steam algorithm. They feed each other a little bit in different ways.
Hmm.
So
Yeah. And I don't. This is a chat between me and Joe, so I don't want it to be too much of a lesson for other developers. But in terms of the Steam page itself, the reason that Joe is getting a little bit of traffic and getting a little bit of wish lists coming in is Steam pages are visual things. Now, Joe doesn't have a trailer yet, so that'll help in the future. But the screenshots are colorful. They show what the game is. The text is not overdone. There's not too much of it, and it is pretty specific, and it tells you what the game is and what you can do in the game. And for me, the most important thing is the GIFs that Joe has put in. And these are sort of like pre-trailers, I like to call them. And I think these are all really important. And I did notice that you are now starting to get a little bit of community feedback. So Steam has this community hub. And so I just quickly looked at it, and I see you did post a news segment. So that's pretty important as well.
Mhm.
So these are all things that are quite good to look at if anyone is interested in doing this kind of thing. But to me, the point is, it seems like a healthy Steam page, and I'm glad that you finally got it up, because this is sort of just that cementing of the fact that this is now a game and this is something that you are serious about.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, you got to put up your $100 and you got to spend the time to put together. It doesn't look like there's that many art assets involved, but like just the logo and background, there's like I think 30 or so, or 24
Yeah,
at least,
it's hard work. I
different
mean,
different formats.
I've made about 6 or 7 Steam pages at this point, and it takes a lot of time. And the thing is, you can't skim over it because it's very important to do right. And the ratio of wish lists that you are getting, non-specifically around 1,500, I think it's quite good, because my game Operator 8 has been in development for 3 years now, or something like that. And I'm going to be launching at the end of the year at some point. I still have to release the announcement for the release date, is what I meant to say. But for that game, after 3 years, I'm sitting at about 14,000 wish lists.
Okay, that's pretty good.
Which is quite good. But reason being, and we won't spend too much time on Steam, but reason being as well, is the fact that I did do one. I think it was the second Steam Next Fest ever. So that was when Steam Next Fest just started, and I assume you haven't done a Next Fest yet.
No, I think it was going on like right as I was launching the Steam page, or maybe just before. And I wasn't ready for that quite yet.
Okay. Well, give me a personal call before you do that, so that I can just give you a few pointers. But you can expect
Definitely I will do that.
2 to 4,000 wish lists for that.
That would be nice.
Yeah, that's more or less what I think your game is going to get on a Next Fest, especially because of the genre and because of the style and everything. It stands out because it's something that there isn't too much of right now, and I think it's a good time for it as well. But yeah, okay. Do you have anything else to say about Steam specifically, or do you want to move on to the next point?
Just a few things, since we are talking about the Steam page. Yeah, I really do want to get a trailer up. A proper trailer will take some time, but one of the things I need to do in the short term is just get some video clips up that are in that the little, I don't know what you call it, the little thumbnail camera roll feed, whatever it is at the top. Just to get some motion in there. And from what I've heard from the Steam marketing experts, when people are browsing Steam pages, they actually don't watch the trailer for the most part. They'll click through the thumbnails to try to get a sense of like, how does the game play, what is the game like, because trailers can often have a bunch of stuff that isn't gameplay, or logos, or whatever. So definitely something I need to do is just throw up some gameplay footage. I think would be just fine there, and something that would be quick to do. I just haven't done it yet. I should get on that. And then the other thing, the other sort of tip that I had heard, and something I tried to follow with like the screenshots that are shown here, is if your game has different environments, especially that have vastly different color palettes, try to include one of each of those. Like if you've got like sort of the typical like fire world, ice world, plant world, green, red, blue, that type of thing. Do that. Yeah. Try not to have screenshots that are all the same environment. Or all the same color palette, because you just sort of glance through it and it's like, oh, this game looks like the same in every screenshot, and that is an instant turn off for people.
Yeah, it's it's really just marketing psychology if you think about it. But just to say something about your point about the trailer, so I do think that you are right. Most people don't click on a trailer, but the way that I see it is that a trailer is for someone that has made it past the screenshots. So someone that is genuinely interested in buying the game. And I don't know what your analytics are like for general consumer analytics, but for me, I think the game has had more than 6 million visits to the page. So if you think about it, 14,000 wish lists is a terrible conversion rate. So that means that my job was not done correctly. As you know,
Oh, I see what you're
I
saying.
don't like marketing, but this is something that I'm trying to get better at. So in some way, 14,000 wish lists should have been more like 100,000 if I did my job better. But we learn and we get better. But I just want to say you kind of do have to look at it that way.
Yeah. I'm trying to think if there's anything else on the Steam page. I mean, we could probably go for an hour on just the Steam page, but I don't
Yeah,
think there's anything major left that I wanted to talk about
yeah,
Steam in particular, other than just go to the Steam page. You can search Infiniwar on Steam and wishlist it, or it should be in links to all of my videos on Twitter and everything else on my YouTube channel. It should be easy to find, with one exception. Actually, the one there's some name collision with Infiniwar, which kind of is a little bit worrying. There's like a 10-year-old game called Infinity Wars,
okay.
like a Magic the Gathering style card game called Infinity Wars that was coming up when I was trying to like Google search Infiniwar Steam. I'm not sure how they haven't been targeted by Disney Marvel yet. Infinity Wars sounds really close to Infinity War, but maybe if they're safe, I'm safe.
Yeah, I
There's
think you
also an
should be fine.
RTS called Infinity War, like just straight up Infinity War. But it's got like one negative review, so I'm not super worried about that, and I think it isn't under active development.
Okay.
But then there's also like all the other games. There's Call of Duty, Infinite Warfare, and like, so it's a little bit worrying.
I
But
think you'll be all right. I think you're giving it too much thought.
yeah, I might be. I mean, it's really an homage to Infiniminer. Zachtronics made this. Do you know this game?
Mm-mm.
So
No
it's
idea.
actually the inspiration for Minecraft. So Notch was playing Infiniminer by Zachtronics. What's his name? Zach. I can't remember his last name. He makes a bunch of like automation programmer style games.
Okay.
Infiniminer. He made Infiniminer. He made Infinifactory. And Infiniwar is sort of an homage to those games, and maybe a little bit of the aspiration of I might not be the next Minecraft, but I hope I inspire the next Minecraft.
Okay.
Is the story there?
That's interesting.
And coming up with names is hard, so I had a long think about how to name the game, and Infiniwar is what I came up with.
Yeah, and
So
it's very important, and I've made some mistakes in that department. I mean, one of my games was called Death Rattle Hell Unleashed. It's like, I don't know what I was thinking with that one, but
it's a cool. I think it's a cool name. I don't know if it ties to the gameplay at all, really, but it's
well, here's the thing.
there better be
like,
some death rattling in there.
that's the thing. I never knew what death rattling was before I named the game, and I didn't even
Okay.
bother to look it up either. I just sort of named it, and then when it was done, I eventually saw what a death rattle was, and it wasn't the prettiest thing to look at. So, at least it kind of works because I won't get too much into it, but it's this game where you play as sort of like a holy warrior that has to vanquish hell after the rupture and things like that. So, but anyway, yeah, naming is important. I'll probably make a video on naming at some point, and I do want to make a video about setting up Steam pages correctly, because I think it's valuable, and I do think the landscape has changed a lot. A lot of the videos that are out now on that kind of things, some of the ones that have hundreds of thousands of views, they are very outdated at this point. I think it's quite old information, and the way that wish lists work have changed as well, which is something I want to talk about in the future as well. But for this video, I think we should probably stick to our list.
Yeah.
Because we have been going for 40 minutes apparently.
Oh, right. And you don't have that much time left. Okay.
No, I can do like another 40 minutes or so, but I just think we should
Okay.
because I mean it's my fault as well. I like to sort of veer off topic quite a lot. But
Yeah.
so check out Joe's game. It'll be in the description of this video as well, and I'll put a little thing where you can go and check it out on the video itself as well. But to get back into the topics, so you mentioned the devlog of my new. It's not really I don't want to call it my new game because it's sort of just like a little distraction, little side project
Yeah.
called Zombie. Actually, it was going to be called Zombabies, and you were going to play as like an infant zombie. But then I don't know, that just didn't work for me. I don't know, it just felt weird. So I just made it Zombuddies, which my brother says, Alvin says, makes it seem like it's a multiplayer game. So I might need to change that in the future as well. So for now, it's just a working title.
Oh yeah. Okay.
So I'm working on this little side project. It's just going to take me a couple of months to do, which is sort of like a clone of Brotato. I don't know if you've played Brotato.
I haven't played Brotato. I have seen it, and I have played Vampire Survivors. So it's a similar.
Yeah,
I think maybe Vampire Survivors was first, and Brotato was like an evolution of that. Maybe.
I'm not sure about that. I do actually want to.
I could be wrong about that. I don't know.
I do think Brotato is quite old. It might be insanely old. Actually,
I could be wrong about that.
Okay, it's not that. No, it's not that old. It's 27 September 2022. So, Vampire. It's about the same time then. Let's see. This doesn't give a year. It just says. Okay, so Vampire Survivors is about a year older.
Okay. Yeah.
So you are correct about that, but the point being that this game will have some procedurally generated aspects in it. So I think if you look back in my videos on YouTube, I made a video a while back about this one game that I'm developing, and this is a theme. I like to work on multiple things at a time, but I'm developing a game called The Gravebane Curse. And this game, I had a big. So this is the game of mine that sort of blew up in YouTube, and I think 2 videos. The third devlog was about why I decided not to do procedural generation, and of course that had a lot of good feedback and negative feedback, being criticism for my way of seeing things. But since that time, I've come around to actually studying up on procedural generation a little bit and challenging myself as a programmer to try and learn these things and maybe not be too opinionated on something that I don't know too much about. So since then, I've come to enjoy some of the aspects of it. And so I wanted to just talk about it a little bit. In your opinion, does it make for good design? And is it something that you are interested in? Not necessarily for your own game, but just maybe for a future project.
Yeah. So procedural generation is the foundation of Infiniwar. So it's like a huge topic in my mind. Like it's so foundational. I baked it into the name. Like the Infinity in Infiniwar is about replayability.
Okay.
It's meant, like, the name of the game is meant to communicate. It's a war game that's replayable.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of campaign-based war games aren't replayable in that way, or aren't as replayable in that way. So
yeah,
I wanted to make it like a first-class citizen, like it's in the name.
Yeah, it's interesting because when I look at games and titles, I don't think about them that deeply. I think you have different types of customers that look at things differently. But now that you said it, Infiniwar, it does seem like it's repeating war. It's an infinity war. So it's interesting to me that I didn't pick up on that. But okay, so like you said, it's a foundational point in your game.
Yeah. Like the foundational idea was, I loved World in Conflict. I played it a bunch. I played the multiplayer a bunch. I played the campaigns a bunch. But then, even though I had this sort of like love in my heart for it, I could play it whenever I wanted, but I didn't.
Mm-hmm.
And why? And part of that was, if you play enough of the multiplayer, like it's a good game and it's exciting and it's fun, but the meta is pretty stale. Like the matches, even in multiplayer, kind of play out the same way every time. It doesn't help that everyone in multiplayer plays the same map over and over too, even though there's a whole bunch of maps to play. That's a totally different conversation of like why people end up, why gamers end up sort of optimizing the fun out of their own games, of like, instead of playing all the variety, they play the one map over and over because it's the most dense map or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and the campaign, you can only play it so many times, and it's the same every time. It's the same 12 missions or whatever it is.
Okay.
So I was thinking, well, there's these other games that I play a lot more that keep having something for me to come back to. What's different? And it's because World in Conflict isn't designed at all around replayability in that sense. And I never played competitively multiplayer, and I'm sure competitive play is more interesting. It was, more public matches, and the public matches always kind of go eventually the same way. After you've played 100 public matches, you've probably seen most of what a multiplayer game has to offer, and I think that goes for most, sort of random public online games.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe not 100, but like maybe 200, 500, something in there.
Yeah.
Where you start to see the repetition, even in multiplayer games with a human opponent.
Okay. Okay. So in your opinion, it is sort of this sort of thing that you think can add a lot of fun and value to a game.
Yeah, and the ability to like come back to it, even if you're not playing it all the time. So one person expressed in the comments that they were really worried about, games that are trying to become your lifestyle, games that are trying to be like take up all your free time, and I totally get that. Mm-hmm. There's a ton of like gross toxic stuff in the game industry, especially with live service games where it's like log in every day to get this thing, log in to do your dailies, and it sounds like chores. It sounds like a second job. Mm-hmm. And I'm not trying to make that. I'm trying to make a game where, even if you drop it and don't pick it up for years, that you can come back and not just play the same campaign again, but play like I could go back to like an old Civilization game, for example, Civilization 2, one of my old favorites, mm-hmm. and pick it up and just have a brand new, maybe not entirely brand new. The game does have similarities from playthrough to playthrough, but a new story to tell, new stuff happens. And it would sort of be like old times in a way.
That's an interesting.
So I'm looking to recapture that, like something where you could go back and not just replay a thing you already did, but do a new thing. Mm-hmm. I'm going to play as this new civilization, and with this, I've never played on this map type. There weren't that many knobs to tweak in the old games, but do a new run with a new build, or something like that. I never played this character type in Diablo. Let me go do that. Mm-hmm. It's not something that's taking up every moment of my life for the next 10 years. It's just something that I can pick up again whenever I feel like it, and get something new and different out of it that I didn't get the last time that I played. So that's kind of the high level of what I'm going for, mm-hmm. and why I'm taking the game in a direction that's pretty different from where most other war games are going. Now that said, I have, with a little bit of concern, been noticing some of the like Regiments is a sort of war game in at least a close proximity to what I'm doing. Mm-hmm. We're like, oh hey, they just released a procedural campaign system. Like, are the AAAs or AA's at least starting to catch on to this idea that, hey, maybe what if we added a roguelike campaign to our war game? But I think for the most part, I'm not that worried about the way those types of games are going to do those systems, because they're going to do them in a way that's very grounded in reality, because of the style of game that they're going for. And I don't have to do that. I can be more creative and a little more experimental than they can. Part of that's to do with the art style. Art style sets expectations. If you've got ultra realistic graphics and you've got a campaign system that does weird, nonsensical, non-realistic stuff, it's kind of a clash. But if you've got more abstract, stylized art style, you can get away with more stuff. I'm going to try to keep it more or less grounded, at least in a way that makes sense in my head, but I've got more room to experiment, so I'm less worried about that. Yeah, okay. But getting back onto procedural generation, sorry. Mm-hmm. And the sort of question is like, does it make for good design? right? Like, is it good? Sometimes you get people pushing back against it. And I think there's some reasons for that, because procedural generation is a tool, and like any tool, it can be used poorly, it can be used without skill, it can be used improperly. And I'm not claiming that I'm some kind of master of procedural generation at this point, but I at least have a good idea, I think, of when it doesn't work and why. And the main one, I think, is this idea. I can't remember who coined this term, but like the bowl of oatmeal. If you think of a bowl of oatmeal, you pour the oatmeal in the bowl, you pour in the water, and like that's all random. All the where the grains of the oatmeal, like how it all fits together, like it's all random. It's not the same. But like one bowl of oatmeal to the next, like it doesn't matter that okay, the grains are rotated differently or whatever. It's all just a big bowl of oatmeal. Who cares? And I think that's where, like, whenever you're in that area of procedural generation where you're like, here's this random static, this random bowl of oatmeal, but it's just another bowl of oatmeal that, yes, it's technically different than the first one, but practically speaking, it's the exact same bowl of oatmeal.
Effectively.
You want to stay as far from... Oops. Oh, hopefully I didn't bump my mic cord here. Hopefully I'm still recording.
Yeah,
I think I am. Let me double check, just make sure. Okay, I still see audio capture, so that's good.
Yeah, I see it on your end, on my end as well.
Yeah, so you want to stay as far away from that end of procedural generation as you can. Just because something is random doesn't mean it is interesting.
That's if I can just take a second on that. That's an interesting thought to me, because it's not something that I've heard, but it is something that I would need to think a bit about, because I can think of use cases for randomness, but minuscule randomness. Effectively something being different each time, but not making a difference each time. So, yeah, I don't have too much to say on that right now, but it is something that I want to think about, because it's an interesting point to me. But yeah, with that said, it's not something that I've heard before. But I think it's an easy thing to make assumptions in game design. But I think a point like that is something that you can think a lot on. You know what I mean? So I think I want to take some time to think about that point before sort of giving my opinion on it. You know what I mean with that?
Yeah. It's something that I've thought about a fair amount, because again, the game is basically a thought experiment of what if a real-time tactics war game was heavily based on procedural generation. Like, what could you do with that concept? What could you do that the genre hasn't done before?
Yeah, because I guess you do need to differentiate, right? Like, you don't want to just... You want to be inspired by something, but you don't want to be that thing.
Yeah. There definitely have been some people who are like, well, this is just World in Conflict with worse graphics. Why would I play that? And I agree with that sentiment. They're wrong about it's just World in Conflict, because, like, yeah, the control scheme, like the moment-to-moment gameplay of, like, I move this tank here, that's really similar. That's intentionally really similar. But the higher level decisions, the higher level structure of the game is completely different. So, if I was just I'm writing my own single player campaign and it plays exactly like World in Conflict, well, you're probably just going to get a worse story. You're not going to get Alec Baldwin as the voiceover, although he's, I guess, maybe less popular these days because of the incident. And you're going to get, worse graphics. So that game I don't think is worth making. Like, just trying to make my own World in Conflict isn't worth making. World in Conflict's already out there. And there's already developers making, sort of the next gen, Broken Arrow and things like that. So I'm not making that game.
Yeah.
So
I'm just curious. That comment that you mentioned, was that a YouTube comment or?
Yeah, it was, and it's interesting because I got comments on both ends of the spectrum, which was, "This is just World in Conflict with worse graphics. Why? That's not worth playing." And and the other end was this strays so far from what makes World in Conflict great that you can't even say you're inspired by it. So it's really interesting to get both extremes and everything in between of, people saying this is too much like World in Conflict, it's not enough like World in Conflict, and everything in between. So I think that's probably good. I think that means I'm probably hitting the right spot.
Yeah, you want to be right in the middle of that.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah, that's really where I want to position myself.
Well, the procedural generation, and whether it makes for good game design sort of bleeds into the next point being replayability versus narrative. Because my game that I'm currently working on releasing, Operator 8, it is a linear game in that you start at one point, you make your way through a section, you collect keys, whatever, to unlock the next section, and then when you finish all the sections, you get to the end of the level. You start the next level and you do it again. But there are a lot of sort of like branching routes and branching paths that'll take you to different places, where there are different things that you can collect and different. So I have this system sort of like Doom 3 where there are these PDAs that have their own little stories. And some of them are linked and some of them aren't. So if you want to experience the whole narrative, you have to actually find all of these pieces of the story. And I do think a very small subsection of players will do that. But it's interesting to me to design this way. And now, of course, this was before my thought process on procedural generation. But it's okay for a game to be linear, as well as being procedurally generated. But let's take an example, my game being the linear game that it is, but with branching paths. In what way would procedural generation help my game in that situation?
I think it's tough especially in like a first person exploration based game. I don't have any experience making those, although I do have experience playing them. I think it is harder to do that well. I'm not saying it's impossible, but it is harder to do that well because the player is so embodied in the space and in the exploration. When things are not designed with intention in that kind of a setting, it's really, really noticeable. Like, people, I haven't played Starfield, but I've heard people talking about how the procedural environments there are crap, or the way that they did procedural was, well, you get like you go to a planet and you get like a random outpost, but it's the same outpost every time. Like literally the same props are in the same places, the same items are in the same places every time. And that's obviously bad. That's just like they were rushed or something. But would it even be all that much better if the props were random? Like if the environment wasn't, we could probably talk for hours about like the right way to do this, but I think 3D first person exploration heavy games are, I haven't thought about this fully, but like it's definitely one of the harder cases. I don't know if it's the hardest case. Maybe puzzle games are even harder to do procedurally because I won't get into that. But exploration based first person games are really tough to do procedurally. I think you'd have to really think about, because we're so familiar with like going into a space as a human character and like looking at stuff and picking up stuff, like the way a space is laid out, all the environmental storytelling, and the fact that you're going to be compared against games that had a huge level design team, handcrafted everything. That's not to say that they don't use any procedural tools in the handcrafting. Like they might be procedurally scattering clutter or what have you, to fill up a level quickly, and but it still has like a designer's eye. So procedurally making a dungeon that's interesting to explore, or like a space station that's interesting to explore, I think is a hard problem. Maybe not unsolvable, but it's not easy.
Okay, well that's an interesting point. I haven't thought about it in that way, but I do see what you are getting at with that. And that basically boils down to, it's not whether it's a better system of design, it's whether it's better for the genre and style of game that you are making.
Yeah, like if it like a procedural first person combat game, I think that has some, because that's very system oriented. I think you can make that interesting.
Hmm.
If a game is heavy on exploration and like player discovery and things like that, I think that is harder to do. I
Okay.
think it could be done, but I think it is harder to do because like the like part of the joy of discovery is that, like No Man's Sky and things like that ran into this, where it's like, here's another weird random blobby creature on a different colored planet that has weird blobby terrain. Like it just all feels very unintentional. I think it's just really hard to do exploration in a way that is procedural exploration in a way that's interesting.
Hmm.
Again, not saying it can't be done or there's not ways to incorporate it. It's just on the harder end of the spectrum. Whereas I think, systems combat oriented stuff more is like more in line um, with what like what procedural generation's strengths are.
Hmm. Well, am I correct in saying that you come from a programming background, right? So that's
Yes.
okay. Um, so the next point is, art background versus programming background, and what kind of game you should make with that background. But I think we can encapsulate this point into the next one, which is how much visuals matter. So you obviously chose a low poly style for your game. So I didn't coin this, but I like to use the term polygonal. That's the sort of look that you have decided to go with for a varying amount of reasons. Some of them obvious. Complexity, time to do the work, performance, all of that kind of stuff. But yeah, basically just tell us a little bit about why you chose the art style that you did. And, being a programmer, is it easier for someone to do a style that would be considered more simple, but that you can make look really good through some basic tools? Just basic post-processing can help a lot with polygonal art. And how much do you think it's going to matter ultimately that you went with this style?
I think it's going to matter a lot in some maybe not obvious ways. I did get some pushback on the art style in Devlog 5. So some people don't like it. That's fine. I think mostly I got more positive feedback than negative, I think. Some people just, they prefer a realistic art style. They're like, what they want out of a war game is they want immersion in the sense of feeling like it's real, like realistic. Like
Okay.
they want all the details on the vehicles to be correct. Like they might know a fair amount about military vehicles, and if something is used incorrectly or modeled incorrectly or functions incorrectly, it takes them out of the experience.
Mm-hmm.
And there are games that cater to that, where it's like the authenticity is the main feature. Um, and I'm not doing that.
Mm-hmm.
Partially that's a knowledge issue. I don't know that much about, like, you have to be really detailed and into the user manuals of all these vehicles and on the War Thunder forums where they're leaking classified information and stuff like that. I'm not at that level. I'm not interested at that level.
Okay, but it's also,
So
more than, the interest of it. It's also not practical for a single developer,
yeah,
and this is something that anyone that is a developer listening, that you do have to think about. If you want to make a Call of Duty clone, then you should scale that down and make a Valorant clone and make it, even more basic than Valorant in terms of art, which is something that I think Joe is doing well. But just because something has a basic art style doesn't mean it doesn't have to look good. And I do think you have gotten to a place where the art really does stand out. To me, it looks really good. And I am an artist. That's my I freelance as a 3D artist, and I freelanced for some big companies in the past. And I think that your game looks really good.
thank you. I'm definitely in sort of a hodgepodge scenario right now where I don't have a consistent art style because consistency takes a lot of time to like get everything to just be where it feels like it's cohesive. So there are places where I look at the art that the game has right now, especially sort of when taken as a whole, like some of the screenshots, especially the ones I put on the Steam page, where it's like, wow, this looks really nice. But then if you like look too closely at some of the details, you're like, that doesn't look right. You know, that doesn't look intentional. Why is that just a box? You know, stuff like that.
Yeah, but I mean, at this point, you can play that off as prototype art, at least.
Yeah. So I'm definitely not where I want to be yet in terms of cohesion. And as I mentioned earlier, I am starting to update some of the really early prototyping assets, like the amphibious transport vehicle is literally just like a malformed tank that I kind of squished around until it was, because I just wanted I wanted to get working on the mechanics for amphibious vehicles, but I didn't have an amphibious vehicle model, and I didn't want to import one that wasn't mine. I didn't want to import something super high poly. So I'm like, all right, I'll just take the tank and mangle it until it's, you know, kind of the right shape. Okay. But it's bad. Like it's not a good intentional design. It's just that was what was quick and easy to do at the time. And then years later, I still have that stupid model. So I'm finally getting around to, you know, making not the final models, but like I'm sort of taking half steps towards the finish line. We got like the cube. Like, what if everything was a cube here? The eventual future finish line, and then my first crack at the models was like, okay, they look like tanks. They don't look great, but you know, it's fine. And then what I'm doing now is sort of the next half step in between, which is like it's a better tank. It's a better amphibious transport. It's not maybe the final one, but it's halfway between the start point and the finish point. So I kind of think of it that way. And let's see what else about the graphic style. Some people were a little bit confused and were thinking, oh, this is a temporary art style and it's gonna go high res in the future. And that is just not what's gonna happen.
Okay.
Like the art is going to improve, the models are going to improve, the look is going to improve, but it's not going to turn into a high res, high fidelity game. That's just not how game art works, really, or at least not how I do it.
No, I mean, if you had a gray box level where it was obvious that was gonna be changed in the future, that would be different. But once you establish an art style, usually you don't change it. You make
like if you squint,
improvements, but you don't really change it.
Yeah, like if you squint right now at a screenshot of Infiniwar, you'll probably see mostly what the finished game will look like. The details will be different. The quality will improve. Quality in terms of like the craftsmanship, not in terms of the resolution, if that makes sense. Like I'm not going to go high res. I'm not going to go high poly. So the quality will improve in terms of craftsmanship.
Yeah. Do you think that coming from a programming background had sort of influenced your decision in the art style direction?
100%. And some of my early devlogs talk about like my early struggles with I was making games or following tutorials, but I was kind of using the art that was provided, and it made me really feel like, oh, this isn't my game, this is someone else's game, because the art has such an important identity for the game that I personally felt like if I wasn't making the art or if I didn't have a big hand in what the game looked like, then I wasn't really making the game. Now you could argue that isn't true, and it probably isn't, but that's how I felt, at least at the time when I was learning. So it was really important for me personally to get to a place where I felt like I could make something myself that I was proud of visually. And I'm not 100% there yet, but I am getting there. And I do have a programmer background. I liked art as a kid growing up. Like I would draw. I kind of stopped that stuff a while back, and this is sort of me getting in touch again with, I would draw like, spaceships and vehicles and things like that. So this is a little bit of getting back in touch with that that side of me after a long break.
Okay.
But I think it is important for developers to lean into their strength.
Yeah,
In
definitely.
terms of like whether they're a programmer, whether they're an artist. There's one devlog that I follow. I don't know if you've seen this one, Crimson Hollow. I can't remember the name of the developer who's making that, but she's a. I don't think I could be wrong about this. I don't think she is or was a game developer before starting this, but she was a professional artist. So like
Okay.
beautiful hand drawn everything. She's making this kind of cozy adventure game,
Okay.
and the art is just it's gorgeous. And she's leaning heavily into that for her devlogs and her game. And I think that's important is to kind of identify your strength. Are you on the art side? Are you on the programmer side, or something else? Music, animation, something, and lean heavily into that.
Yeah. Do you
You
want to
will
make
have to pick up.
Do you want to make just text-based games?
Yeah, you will need to shore up your weaknesses. Like I'm having to shore up the art side, um, and in some ways, I'm kind of like equalizing them. I'm actually not that good of a programmer, but I'm good enough to kind of get by. So I think that is really important is to lean into your strength. Lean into your strength more. Like if you are not an artist, being an art first game is going to be tough. If you're not a programmer and you're like, I'm going to make a game about programming where you program machines, and that's going to be tough.
Yeah. I mean, programming can, even for simple games, it can leak into becoming tough pretty easily. Most games now have inventory systems, but programming those are extremely hard. And I think new developers sort of get into that trap quite easily, and then you sort of do tutorials as you develop, and at some stage it just becomes it's not feasible to release the game anymore. So you do have to, like you said, it's very important to know what you're good at and to focus on that thing. Now, someone like myself that has been doing it for a very long time sort of has a little bit of everything. I would say I'm more art oriented, but it's important to know a lot about everything, especially with the engine that you choose, and performance and optimization of that performance is extremely important. And that's why it's important to choose a visual style that makes sense, like in your case, something that probably on the programming side, yes, but on the art side wouldn't need that much optimization.
Yeah, that was one of the reasons was what if I just made everything super low poly and have no textures, because then I don't have to worry. Like any time I'm spending in the profiler like debugging performance at this stage is just slowing down, getting word out about the game, getting features in. Um and I want to get a sense of like how the game plays without having to optimize first. Now that's not saying that you can just totally ignore performance from the beginning and worry about making it fast later. That can be a recipe for disaster as well. But cutting the corners where you can up front certainly helps.
And for your game specifically, the note that I have is basically just what hardware are you targeting. But I'm also curious, are you looking at going to places like consoles? Are you looking at going to mobile? And if so, what are your considerations for the optimization for those?
Right now, no. I don't think anyone has really cracked the real-time strategy game on a non-PC yet. I mean, I know there have been attempts. I'm definitely a mouse and keyboard guy. I just think that kind of game controls better on mouse and keyboard than it does on a controller. I don't like controllers personally. I don't like using them except in very specific. Like if you're playing like a fighting game or something, or like an isometric action game, like sure, okay, yeah, it works for that. Um, but like any kind of UI heavy game, um, you know, uh, playing Diablo on the or Diablo 3 on the PlayStation, really fun game to play. Like control your character. Absolute nightmare in the menus though. Like an action RPG with all the menus, skills and inventory and stuff on a controller is just a nightmare. And I mean, Blizzard did a great job, like a best in class job at making a controller based UI for that, but it still sucks.
Yeah.
And so So I am not, and I do actually plan to have a fair amount of that type of stuff in the game, although we'll see how much exactly ends up in there. I did get people asking about targeting PC hardware targeting,
Mm-hmm.
um, and right now I'm sort of there's a number of ways to spend your performance budget as a developer. One way is to go crisis style and just spend your performance budget on making the game look absolutely amazing, and only the high end rigs can run it or whatever. That's one way you can do it. Another way is you spend your performance budget conservatively and say, okay, I'm going to spend it on being able to run on absolute potato hardware,
Mm-hmm.
and that's another option. And people mostly think of it in terms of that spectrum, like potato to crisis. But there's actually another dimension to it, which is like basically time to market. Like how quickly can I build this thing? How many corners can I cut? How fast can I move as a developer? And not squander the performance budget, but you're trading performance for not you're trading performance for time, which
Yeah.
is what I'm doing right now.
Okay.
So I am not currently targeting like the lowest end potato hardware. I'd like to get there eventually, but that's like a later problem. So
Mm-hmm.
right now I'm just saying, okay, all of my performance headroom is just going into I can throw as many projectiles at the screen as I want to, and I don't need to worry about it because my rig runs it fine. Will that work fine on like a 10-year-old laptop? Probably not.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm curious. What are your specs?
Let's see. I bought this. I used to build my own PCs for the longest time, and then this last one, I decided I'm too old and have too little time, and I just decided to buy an off the shelf Corsair. So what the heck even is it? I don't know. It was the good but still kind of cheap one.
Yeah, but when you buy
But
pre-builds, that can still be expensive.
oh yeah, it was expensive, but it
Because
was I got to the point where my time was more valuable than my money, so I said, all right, here you go, Corsair.
yeah, because it's I'm always curious about this kind of stuff because up until this move to this new house, I actually ran a PC building company
Hmm.
as well. So it's very interesting to me as a game developer to see the sort of ratio of what PCs people are using, because one thing that I realized is there are a lot more low budget PCs out there than you would think.
Yeah.
And I think you don't see that so much online because people aren't necessarily broadcasting their specs when it isn't top of the line stuff, but that doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And this has been a big challenge for me in Operator 8 because it can, especially from you would think odd, but from a programming point of view, it can become cumbersome pretty quickly, to have to
Yeah.
optimize things. And being a self-taught programmer, I don't necessarily always have the best steps to do something, and so it can be a challenge to get that optimization going, but it's also very rewarding. Last week I actually fixed the script and it added 10 FPS to the game, and that kind of thing is very rewarding as well. So it's interesting to me to speak about these things because it's something that all developers really have to consider at the end of the day.
Yeah, and I did finally pull it up here. It's an RTX 4070 and a 13th gen Intel i7 3700K.
Did you
So
say
I
did
think
you
it's
say
it's not
4070?
4070. Yeah.
Yeah, that's not a bad system at all. It's quite a
Yeah. Like I said, it wasn't the like spend 10 grand system. Like it wasn't the top end, but it was like a notch or two lower,
well
and
well to put
but it was
to
also
give
on
you
sale. So
some perspective. The and I was gonna say this about Steam as well previously. Just this is way too late, but just as an interesting note for everyone, the conversion rate for wish lists on Steam is quite low. So it's interesting to actually check your conversion rate when it does release. So for most people, it varies a lot, but it can be as low as under 10%. So it's interesting to me to see how that converts, but also keeping with Steam, something that is interesting as well is that the most used graphics card on Steam is a 3060. So
Okay, that tracks.
yeah, so if the game runs well on a 4070, it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to run well on the average hardware. And like you said, if you wanted to run well on a 10-year-old laptop that has a 1650 in it, then optimization becomes very necessary.
So just to be clear, this is the new system. It's not that new anymore. It's like a year old. But I was developing the game on a much older system, and I think that one was, I want to say it was a 1070, like 1070. So like several generations older.
That's a good card to use for performance testing.
Yeah, the main reason I upgraded was actually not the game; it was video editing. Because like rendering was taking a super long time, and my camera was recording in 4K. My new, not new anymore, but new at the time, like real camera, not recording with the phone anymore, was recording 4K, and just the video editor program was just choking on rendering the 4K footage. Or even like while I was editing, it was really, excuse me, just like slow to respond, kind of chugging. And I eventually realized part of that was the SSD. It was an older generation SSD. So anyway, I mostly ended up upgrading not for the game, but for the video stuff. But it helps for the game too, because, yeah.
Okay. Well, that's interesting to me. So it does seem like it'll run well, but, to developers, just be mindful of this because for operator, it's been a challenge, especially with the way that Unity handles rigid bodies. Now, I don't know if that affects you specifically, but for me, it has been a big challenge. And yeah, I've had to do a lot of optimization programming.
Yeah, I don't have that much going on with rigid bodies. There's a little bit, like vehicle wrecks and stuff like that. Although I did end up disabling temporarily trees falling over from getting destroyed by explosions, because that has a bunch of like rigid body physics type stuff going on, and I was debugging performance. So anyway, there will be some of that, but probably not nearly as much as you've got going on.
Yeah, it's a different sort of game. So yeah, I only have about 10 minutes left here, so let's get to the last point, and then we'll wrap up. So I assume your game isn't one that is going to have a ton of voice lines. So for my game, for Operator 8, it is the kind of game where there is quite a few voice lines and quite a few recording sessions happening for getting those sorts of things into the game. And something that I've been thinking about with having all of this, these voice lines in the game, is it's important for someone that is not a native English speaker to be able to enjoy this as well, from a enjoyment perspective, a standpoint of just playing the game, but also financially for myself. Is this something that you've given any thought to?
I hadn't. Well, so there's sort of two sides to this. One is the voiceover side, and one is the localization side. I think I'm actually. I want to have a lot of voiceover stuff in the game, and not the like traditional here's a story being delivered by a character type stuff. Yeah. But RTSs have a surprising amount of, or real-time tactics games have a surprising amount of audio in the form of unit responses and just like prompts, notifications, things like that. Where you don't want the unit to have one response when you move it, because that gets super annoying. You don't even want it to have three, because those same three get really annoying over and over. You want it to have like 10 or more. You want them to be contextual. Like it's better if when the unit is not in combat, the response is sort of chill, maybe even bored sounding. But when they're in combat, they get more excited. It's it's more immersive that way. Responses for things like you're calling in an airstrike. Well, you to really sell the immersion, like you want to hear the crackle of the radio. You want that pilot calling in that they're inbound in 10 seconds, and here's the the payloads being delivered. That type of stuff.
Yeah, getting all of a sudden one
the radio
one
chatter,
action needs 40 voice lines.
Exactly. Like if I just go with kind of the world in conflict baseline, the like calling in an airstrike is there's a response, a voice response for acknowledging that the strike was called. You need multiple variations of that. It's not the same every time. Otherwise, that'll get old and annoying. There's a response for when the strike hits, and it's contextual. So if you hit friendlies, there's a different voice line for that. If you hit enemies, there's a different voice line for that. If you hit nothing, there's a different voice line for that. Like, hey, who gave us these coordinates? Like, these are, these coordinates were outdated last week. What's the deal? We hit nothing but dirt.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's different variations of all those. And then at least in World in Conflict,
pretty quickly.
There's 3 factions. So now you've got, well, we've got to have a Russian guy do it. We got to have an American guy do it. We got to have a European guy do it, guy or gal. And you start multiplying all that out, and you're like, holy crap! There's you can actually go on YouTube, and there's like World in Conflict tactical aid voiceover or something like that. And there's multiple videos that are just the voice lines back to back, and it's like hours of voice lines.
Wow, that's crazy. I hadn't thought about it in that way, but just the numbers adding up in my mind are crazy about what this would cost. If you, because obviously I don't know what your budget is, but for me, I have to. I don't have a recording studio or anything like that, but I hire people to do recordings, and if I had to do that, it would just be thousands of dollars.
Oh yeah, it'll be expensive, and that's where I haven't decided yet. Like, will I actually do unit responses? That'll be tough and a lot of money. I definitely want to do at the very least responses for calling in like the tactical aids, the strikes, because they're very like impactful player moments. So I really want to highlight them, and I think the radio chatter that happens as a result adds to the ambiance, like the feeling of the immersive feeling of the game.
Yeah.
So I think it's important, and I want to do it. One thing, well, I could probably talk about this more some other time. One of the things I sort of stumbled into backwards, there's a lot of things in this game that are like this, where I just kind of by accident have something that's specific to this game that makes it easier for me to do than it might be for a different game. And it's all over a radio, so it can sound crackly. And actually I have to apply a filter to make it crackly, so it doesn't need to be like a pristine audio recording on a pristine studio microphone in a pristine sound studio like most video game voiceover has to be. Like, you can literally just record it on your phone, and I'm going to pass it through a terrible radio filter anyway, and all that stuff doesn't matter, goes away. So just by virtue of the fact that all my voiceover is going to be over a crackly military radio makes my process for recording the voiceover significantly easier.
Yeah. Well,
and that's sort of just an accident of like what the game needs. Like, not every game can do that.
That's true. But outside of, the game itself's audio and text, there is also, of course, the Steam page and your marketing resources. So have you given any thought into the localization for that? And, this is something that most developers probably, I'm talking about indie developers, but most of them probably don't even give any thought to this kind of thing.
I hadn't really. It was more of like I'll worry about that when the time comes. But as of the launch of my Steam page, like on day 3 or something like that, I got a big unexpected spike, and I was checking the numbers, and I was getting a surprising amount of traffic from Japan.
Yeah.
And I was just like, what is this? Why am I getting traffic from Japan? And it turns out that some Japanese Twitter like news aggregator or gaming news aggregator they must like scrape new Steam pages or something like that and do posts about them.
Yeah.
It turned out that they made a post about the Steam page, and it got 25,000 views or something on Twitter. I had no idea this was happening. So for one day, I had more traffic from Japan than from the US, which was very surprising.
Yeah, I don't think people realize how big the Asian markets are.
So I'm thinking about it more. I started having to Google it because I'm like, well, I think traditional Japanese is written vertically, but I don't think they do that for, text in games, so maybe it wouldn't be that hard. I don't know. So I'm definitely very ignorant in that area, but it's something I'm now thinking about more, just because. And I've heard plenty of advice of like, hey, if you hit big in a country that somehow for some reason there's a lot of fans of your game in that country, like do a localization. You'd be surprised how valuable it can be. So it's something I'm starting to think about because of incidents like this, or happy accidents, I
and that's
guess.
probably going to happen more so, to anyone that's listening that is a developer. It is pretty important. I'm also working on getting the localized versions of my Steam page up and running. And it's something that takes a couple of weeks to do, but in the end it can be very valuable to you as a developer. So I would definitely say go for it.
Yeah, localizing the Steam page will be one thing. Localizing the game would be
but I do think you can separate
another.
those. I don't think you necessarily have to localize the game if there is no indication of a big spike in interest from another location. But if you do have that, it is also something to consider. But okay, I'm pretty much out of time. So
Okay, yeah.
This has been quite a interesting chat. We got off topic a lot, but I do enjoy doing that as well. And I've learned a lot about your game, which has been pretty interesting. I now understand it a little bit better, and I'm definitely going to keep following it. I think we are set to do another recording at some point. So this is going to be the second out of 3. But from my side, it's been a lot of fun, and I've really enjoyed talking to you.
Yeah, here as well. Always a pleasure. Happy to do another one in the future.
Yeah, it'll definitely be a lot of
So
fun.
thanks for having me.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm going to put Joe's game again in the section below and on the screen, and I'm going to do the same for my game, Operator 8. So check us both out, and thanks for watching.
Thanks. Take care.
All right. Cheers.